All right, welcome back everybody. We're here back at the house. I'm working on the flat panel, getting it sanded, getting it ready for starting to mask up and do our designs. So up till now we have, what have we done? Cut the metal with the plasma cutter, ground it, drilled it, sanded it, primed it, sanded it again. And then we did the silver base, the flake, and the clear. So last time we saw it was cleared in the booth. We applied 4 coats, I believe, of the clear, just enough to start burying the flake. And what we need to start doing now is leveling it out. When it's left after the clear is put over the flake, it's kind of lumpy, because all the flake is standing up. They're little chunks. So it's got a rough surface, and we need to flatten that out in order to start masking and doing our designs. Okay, like I say, if it's not nice and smooth, the tape doesn't like to stick to it all the time, and it'll start peeling. And if you're doing a lot of masking, you want to make sure the tape is sticking good. So what we're using is water, so a water bottle you'll need. Soft pad, so I'm just using the thinner one, flexible one. A soft pad of some sort is needed. And then the other thing I'm using is a squeegee. So this is just a flat piece of rubber, and what I use it for is, as I'm sanding, to check the progress, I'll dry it off. So I'll just squeegee off the water with this, off the surface of the panel, and that'll give me a real quick indication of how far I've gone and how far I need to go. So grab yourself a squeegee also. You can always use paper towels or something if you don't have access to squeegees, just something to dry off the surface real quick. It makes it a lot easier. Now, a lot of people use these also as a sanding pad inside their sandpaper, which is fine. It works. The only thing you got to watch out for is these raised letters on one side. So one side is smooth, and really all that's used on these is the edges when you're used as a squeegee. But if you're sanding, you want to watch out for these raised letters because they're going to leave an imprint as you're sanding. You'll end up with little grooves. So you want to be careful of that when you're sanding. So use this just to squeegee off the water. The other thing we're doing is sandpaper, right? So again, with the wet or dry sandpaper, it's the one with the black grit on it. Okay, so we can use it either with water or dry. With water, it lasts a lot longer. It still will wear out fairly quickly because it is fine. However, it won't get clogged up as much if you're using water. Okay. Now, I brought out 2 grits just because I think there's you don't always have to stick to one grit depending on your situation and your level of experience. If you're just beginning, you might want to start with maybe an 800. So if I see the 800 right there, this is a bit finer, but it won't be as aggressive, and it'll kind of give you a little bit more time. It's going to take longer to sand, of course, but I don't think you'll get in as much trouble because it's going to be sanding slower, so you'll be able to see your progress. Okay, I believe I'm going to use a little bit of 600. So 600. And remember, the more aggressive the grit, the more care you have to take. It's going to take off a lot more material quicker, so you want to make sure that you're not over sanding it. Okay, so everything at this point, we want to be very, very careful not to sand too deep. We don't want to start going through our layers. Anything where you burn through, when I say burn through, I mean a sanding through. So anywhere where you sand through or burn through, it's going to show up as either primer or bare metal, depending on how far you go. And that's going to show through your final product. It's going to show in your designs, okay? Because we are using candy colors, so you're able to see through the color into what's underneath, okay? So from this point on, you got to be real cautious with your sanding. Be very meticulous and pay attention to what you're doing, okay? So I'll be using the 600 to give this a sand. And again, to cut it, just line up the corners here. So line up your corners. Kind of stretch it across there, crease that one, and then while you're still holding this one on the corner, just kind of work it down. Okay, fold it back the opposite way, and then carefully tear it. Okay, now we've got 2 sheets. And again, same thing, these are folded into thirds. So you fold them into 3, okay, so one into the other. And then you're going to grab your soft pad, and that'll go right inside, okay? Now, one thing to remember with these soft pads, when you're done with them, don't throw them away with the sandpaper. A lot of people will forget they're in there, right? They're done with their sandpaper, so they toss it away, and we probably lose 30, 40 of these a year just from people throwing them away. So please don't throw these away. Be careful. Make sure you get them back out of the sandpaper. All right, so sandpaper, soft pad, water, and squeegee. That's all you need for right now, okay? And I wanted to show you, the panel if we can get kind of a look at it. And from this point on, you're really not looking at the, don't look at the color of it. We're not concerned at this point with what's underneath as far as the silver or the flake. We're looking at the surface of the panel to start getting it flat. So from here on, don't look at the color, look at the surface. So that's why we're always using overhead lights with the reflection. So you can see the reflection in there, right, with the overhead lights. And if you see it as the reflection is going across the surface, you can see a lot of bumps and lumps, right? It's not going across there nice and smooth. All those lumps and bumps are what we need to get sanded out. Okay, so it is shiny. There is some shine on there. Looks decent, but we need to smooth it out. Okay, so we'll bring it in close and we'll start sanding. And with the sanding, of course, it takes a while. And going through the videos as I'm editing them, I sometimes think, well, maybe it's a little too long. I'm showing too much sanding. The people are going to get bored watching sanding. But the reality is, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to make it seem like this is a breeze. You're going to sand through this in about 2 minutes. It's going to take time. And so I kind of want to show a little bit of the time that it takes to actually do some of this. I don't want you to get the idea that you're going to have this panel done in like 2 days and you'll be on to other projects. No, it's going to take a while. The steps take a while. The sanding takes a while. You got to be very meticulous and detail oriented. So slow down, take your time. And of course, as you're learning, everything's going to take a little bit longer when you're learning, right? As you get better, you're going to speed up. At the beginning, though, don't worry about speed. Only worry about doing the best you can, trying to put out a quality product. Okay, the speed will come over time. As you get better, you improve your process, you get better tools, equipment like that. So for right now, be patient, slow down, and do a nice job. That's the only thing you need to worry about, is doing the best you can at this time and trying to improve as you go along, right? Every time you do something, it's practice. You should be getting better each time, okay? So I'll bring you in close and we'll start doing a little bit of sanding. Once it's sanded, assuming we don't have any problems, which I doubt we will, it'll be ready to start masking. So we'll start masking out our first design and doing a little bit of the old school graphics, right? Fish scales, lace patterns, stuff like that. Okay, so all right, so I'll bring you in close and we'll do a little bit of sanding. All right, so I got you in up close. I'm going to get started doing a little bit of sanding. And again, I'm wearing an apron. I put an apron on. It gets a little bit messy. If you're wearing some nice shoes, you might want to cover them up or switch out. You're going to get wet a little bit. So just be aware of that. So I got my squeegee, I got my sandpaper with the soft pad in there, and I got my water. And again, with the water, just kind of keep it flowing. You don't need to flood it, but you do want to have a nice stream of water flowing. Before you do sand it, if this panel's been sitting around the shop for a while, it's probably got a little bit of sanding dust on there. So make sure that you wipe it down with a wet paper towel or whatever you need to do to clean it first, so that you're not sanding in grit, right? You don't want to make additional scratches with dirt caught in between the paper and the panel. So wipe it off first before you start sanding. And a couple things to watch out for. We're doing the same kind of pattern, right? Mix it up. Don't go in a straight line all the time. And the biggest thing on these is watch out for your edges, okay? Watch out for the edges, because that's where it's going to burn through first. You're going to sand through your edges, so you want to make sure that when you're sanding, you don't sand over the edge, right? You're not sanding over the edge, you just sand up to it. So sand up to it, not over it. And I'll usually save that edge for very last when I can get it all dried off, and just come in and detail around the edges nice and gentle to avoid burning through. All right, a little bit of burn through is not a big deal, but this is the time when you need to start practicing on how far to go, when to stop, okay? So start sanding. You're going to notice, you're going to think it's all sanded right away, but as you dry it off, you're going to see that it's only going to sand the peaks of the flake first, where the high spots are, and then it starts taking a little bit longer the further down you get. Right. Again, I'm not trying to go over the edge. I'm just sanding up to it. Just kind of pick a spot and start sanding. All right. Now, what you're looking for is to get rid of all the shine. All right. So everything should be dull, without a shine. And the way to check that is with the squeegee, all right? So every once in a while, to check your progress, grab the squeegee and just squeegee it off. Like you're squeegeeing the windows at the gas station on your mom's car, right? So what that does is it dries off the surface really quick and we're able to check our progress. Right? Now let's see if we can see it in the camera here. Alright, so you can see that the shine is starting to disappear. It's still a little bit wet, but what you're looking for is the dull to be you want it to be dull everywhere. You want it to be a kind of a matte finish. Now it's going to start looking kind of milky because you're taking away the shine, and then people start worrying, well, am I still going to be able to see the flake underneath there? Yes, once it's re-cleared, the shine comes back and all the color comes back. But for right now, all we're looking for is a sanded finish that's all nice and dull, and you can see the texture. You can kind of see some of the shine that's in there with the reflection. Right, so you can see a little bit up in here where it's half sanded, half shiny. We're getting it to where it's all dull, okay? So let's continue. And if you need to put something underneath the panel to support it, you can see this one's a little bit wobbly, but not too bad. You shouldn't be doing too much pressing. Don't be too aggressive. And remember, this paper is not going to last really long. It's a fine grit, and we're doing a lot of sanding with it. So you'll probably go through maybe a full sheet on one side. Remember, this is just a half a sheet right here, but I can already feel that it's getting dull. And we really haven't sanded that much. So just be aware, it doesn't last for very long, and you end up wasting your time if you're sanding with dull paper. Okay, so I'm just getting kind of half of it done here, and I'll squeegee it and see where I'm at. And really the only way to know where you're at is to make sure it's completely dried off, either with a towel or with a squeegee. Because there's no indicators while it's all wet how far you've gone. Alright, so sand a spot and check it. So let's check where we're at here. Alright, and again, we're just looking at the surface. I'm not looking at the color. I'm not looking at the flake. I'm not concerned with that right now. Looking decent. Looking decent. As you start thinking you're getting close to the end, make sure you're checking your progress a little more often so you don't over sand. Once an area is completely sanded, don't keep going over it. Finish up a spot and move on. Remember, you have a very limited amount of clear that we have. And once you go through, it's going to start sanding into the flake and then the silver. All right, so just be cautious. You can kind of imagine this is an automobile vehicle that you had just painted and you're getting ready to sand it and maybe do a little buffing or add a second color or something, and you start sanding through. It causes a big problem. You got to start redoing jobs. So it's best to be cautious and be very, very aware of what you're doing. Don't get distracted while you're doing this. Still need to do a little bit more sanding over here. This side's looking pretty decent. I know I'll have to come back and do a little bit of detail work just to get all the spots. This is why you want to make sure that you get enough clear on there and you're shooting it correctly. so that you don't ruin your panel at this stage. If you only put on like 3 light coats, you're going to end up sanding through, right? So you want to make sure you do, I usually do 4 decent coats, full coats, to make sure I get enough clear on there. Okay. Now I'm looking at it, it's kind of hard to tell. Let me see if I can dry it off a little bit. All right. So I'm trying to get a good reflection, so you can kind of see I've dried it off. And you can kind of see with the reflection, I'm just looking at the reflection of the lights here. So you can see this half is still a little bit of shine. And if I'm over here, right, this is looking a lot better. Not quite as much shine. All right. You can see a little bit around the edges there. But overall, like this area is looking pretty flat. There's still a little bit of shiny spots that I'll go through. Okay, but this is what you're looking for, is the texture. Get rid of the texture. So it's all completely dull and flat like it is there. Okay, so I'll continue sanding. I'll grab the other half of the 600, start the other one. And again, I would probably recommend 800 if you're just beginning, so it doesn't get too out of hand and you sand too much. So I'd rather err on the side of caution if you're just learning, so that you don't have to start redoing this, right? And you can see, like when I'm sanding around the edges, it looks like the sandpaper is hanging over the edge a little bit, but I'm not sanding over the edge. My fingers are still on the panel, and just a little bit of the sandpaper is overhanging, which is fine. You just don't want to sand over the edge like that with pressure. You will take the paint off. Like I say, check it often. If you're just starting out, check it more often than I'm checking it here, obviously, so that you know how far you're going, how far you need to go, when to stop. So, a lot to pay attention to when you're just starting out. Now imagine doing this to an entire vehicle, right? This is going to take you a while. This is just a small panel, right? Imagine just a hood. How many of these does a hood equate to? All right, imagine doing 10 or 20 of these. That equals 1 hood. It's a lot of sanding. And also a lot more chances for problems. So that's why you really want to be detail oriented. You want to pay attention to what you're doing. Okay, so let me squeegee it off. And even if you have paper towels that you're going to dry it off with, getting the majority of the water off with the squeegee speeds up the process quite a bit. So get the majority off and then wipe it down the rest of it with a paper towel. It'll dry a lot quicker. Okay, so let that dry off a little bit, and we'll check it, see how much more we have to do. All right, we're looking pretty decent. I'm never sure how to get the best view so that you can see the reflection. So a little bit of light on there. You can still see as I angle it a little bit, little bits of shine in a few spots. I mean, overall, it's looking really good. All right, so what we're looking for is to be completely dull without all these little shiny spots. So you can see little bits of shine, right? Little bits of shine popping through. Those are the things we want to go for. Okay. Now also, this is the time we can start sneaking up on our edges and getting the edges a little bit. Usually they're not as sanded as the center of the panel. So now is the time we can start sneaking up a little bit and start hitting the little spots that still have a little bit of sanding to do. So I'm not sanding over the edges, I'm just sanding up to them, just a little bit more precise now. Now one thing I do is I can kind of run my finger along the edge, so I can kind of hook my pinky on the edge and use that as a guide. I don't know if you can see that, right? So I can kind of hook a finger on the edge and use that as a guide, so I know I'm not going to go over the edge, right? So there's little tricks you can do just to kind of protect yourself from making yourself more work. and most of it just comes with experience. Once you've been doing this long enough, you learn a lot of tricks, and you experience all the problems multiple times. And you want to get as much of the shine off within reason. If you know you got some deep spots that aren't going to come out without ruining the colors underneath, then you need to stop, right? That's a decision you need to make. Dry it off and let's check it. We should be pretty close to being finished. There might still be a couple little spots to detail, but that's not a big deal. I don't see any spots where it got sanded through, which is good. And again, when you're learning, there will be sand throughs, there will be burn throughs. It's just part of learning. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just learn from it and try not to do it the next time, right? Obviously, this isn't something that a customer is going to be receiving. You're not going to probably sell it. So this is just for your own personal satisfaction. So don't beat yourself up over it if the first one doesn't come out perfect. It's part of learning, it's part of practice. The only way you're going to get better at this this craft is by practicing a lot, okay? But what I was saying was the difference between a painter and a great painter, just an average painter and a great painter, is attention to detail, how much detail they put into their work, right? Take some pride in their work, and also problem solving. How can they problem solve? Do they have answers? Can they do some critical thinking? As far as like, if a problem happened on this panel, how would you avoid doing it on the next panel, right? So you need to learn from your mistakes and correct yourself before it happens again. So a lot of painters can't do that. They'll keep on making the same mistakes over and over again, blaming it on the product or something else like that, when they just don't know how to fix things. They don't know how to problem solve. So if you want to become a painter, you got to be able to problem solve quickly. You can't wait, like if you got a question on paint, you can't wait 2 or 3 days for a paint tech to get back to you or a paint store to send somebody out. You have to solve it on your own so that you can keep moving with the jobs and make money. So problem solving is huge. Critical thinking as far as preventing problems or solving a problem while maybe you're in the middle of painting a car and you have a problem, you got to figure out how to solve the problem quickly without holding up the job or losing money. Okay, so those are a couple of things that make a good painter. And all of it just comes with experience, practice, practice, practice. I can't teach you everything over a video. I can just kind of go over the basics. You actually have to get hands-on and start doing this day in and day out to get better at it. Okay, so the panel's dried off pretty much, a couple of water spots. I'm just kind of looking at it. If you can see a reflection, there's still a little bit of water streaks, but that's all right. But overall, it's looking pretty dull, not a lot of shine. Looks pretty good. There's a couple little spots that I'll hit a little bit more, but overall, I think we're pretty decent. Okay, I think we're pretty decent. So I'll sand it one more time, just a little bit, just to take off these little spots, and I think we'll be good with this. All right, so be very careful when you're sanding, be very cautious, take your time, and you'll come out with good results where you don't have to redo the panel, right? That's the main goal, is to keep moving, keep progressing. So the next time you see this, I'll probably be getting the masking done. So I'll bring you in close and start masking out our first design that we do. We'll measure it out and I'll show you how to do all that. And then next up is we start shooting the designs. Right, so this will have 4 corners and a center diamond. So each corner will get something different. Maybe we'll do some lace, some fish scales, some 3D tape graphics, who knows? And we'll do something cool in the middle. So next up, you'll start seeing a little bit of masking, and we'll get spraying on this. All right.